Hey everyone, Scoobyfoo here. Season of the Lost has arrived, which means another Season Pass exotic. Let's look at what it does, how well it does it, and how it squares up to other weapons. Lorentz Driver, a linear fusion rifle in the energy slot, making it the second linear fusion to take special ammo instead of heavy. The intrinsic exotic trait is Lagrangian Sight, which reads as follows. This weapon marks targets with an automated targeting system. Final blows on marked targets generate a telemetry pattern. Picking up a telemetry pattern grants bonus ability energy. Collecting 3 telemetry patterns without dying grants this weapon bonus damage for a long duration. The exotic perk is EM Anomaly, which reads, a precision final blow with this weapon creates an implosion that pulls in nearby targets and damages with an additional detonation. Let's explain what all that means. EM Anomaly first, since it's a bit simpler. Cutting away all the jargon, this is a delayed dragonfly effect that pulls in enemies during that delay. Lagrangian Sight? That one's a bit more complex. Step by step, the weapon will mark a target with what I can only equate to the old wall hack mark that you'd get from wearing OEM. You'll kill the enemy, and it'll drop this little thing. You pick 3 of them up, and Lorentz Driver will gain a 50% damage buff to both the main shot and dragonfly effect for 30 seconds. It did say a long duration. And that timer can be refreshed by picking up more of the telemetry tag things that enemies drop. It has a catalyst that, well, I'll tell you when I have it and know. After all, this is a first impressions. Comparisons, numbers, then thoughts. The best comparison for Lorentz here is Arbalist, as it's the only other special ammo LFR. Fun fact, they deal the exact same damage, ignoring the 5% bonus damage that Arbalist gets from being a kinetic. This is interesting, actually, because Arbalist also has a 50% damage increase from Disruption Break for whenever you break a shield. Meaning that despite having the exact same charge time, reserves, per shot damage, and even the same damage buff when being used properly, they have very different but equal uses. Arbalist, keeping in mind that it's going to be getting anti-barrier later in the season, letting it proc Disruption Break on barrier champions, is very much focused on single target damage and general shield breaking. While not every HVT has a shield, for those who do, getting the 50% buff for Arbalist is simply a matter of shooting the enemy. For Lorentz Drive, getting the 50% buff is a bit more complicated, but with the generous 30-second timer on the buff and the ability to refresh it so long as you have a supply of adds, it is much more generally usable compared to Arbalist. Quick numbers. Lorentz Drive deals 36,663 damage to the head, up to 11,851 damage with EM Anomaly, and has a charge time of 553 milliseconds. Over one magazine, we deal 37,539 DPS, and 30,578 DPS over the full reserves in a Lunafaction's Let's try that again. 30,578 DPS over the full reserves in a Lunafaction's Rift that actually lasts long enough. It holds 20 shots in reserves, giving it 733,260 total damage. Since Lagrangian Sight is just a 50% damage buff, you can apply that to those numbers for its DPS with the buff up. Since Arbalist is the exact same as Lorentz, here's Cloudstrike's numbers for a better general reference. I chose this specifically because it's another long-range special weapon that can perform both ad clear and DPS roles. Looking at these directly, we can see that without Lagrangian Sight active, Lorentz still beats Cloudstrike in total damage, but lags behind in DPS, especially over one magazine. Once you get the perk active for Lorentz though, it's a different story. DPS over one magazine jumps up to nearly match Cloudstrike, while handily beating it in DPS over the full reserves and absolutely blowing it out of the water in total damage. Remember, Lagrangian Sight lasts for 30 seconds and can be extended by picking up additional telemetry things. So, my first impressions for the gun. If you couldn't tell, I think it's pretty dang good. EM Anomaly does more than enough damage to clear adds around the main target, and Lagrangian Sight giving a quite frankly ridiculous 50% buff for 30 seconds means that this thing can pump out some damage. For Nightfalls, I think Arbalest will win out for me once it has anti-barrier, due to the risk of having to either dive into enemies to grab the telemetry, or risking it disappearing altogether, though it does have a generous lifespan while on the ground. This could, of course, change depending on what the Catalyst does, but I can only go off of what I have right now. However, for easier content where facing 2 Legionaries at once doesn't result in instant death, I think I would pick Lorentz over Arbalest, as only 1 out of 3 champion types actually have a shield to be broken in the first place. And barrier champions don't seem like they're going to be showing up very often this season. Ignoring champions though, in general, enemies that both have shields and are bulky enough to warrant something like Arbalest are rarer than you'd think, meaning, in my opinion, you'll get much more use out of EM Anomaly and Lorentz Sight than you would Arbalest. Comparing Lorentz to other weapons, as I showed in the comparison to Cloudstrike, if you have Lorentz Sight active, this thing is a very, very solid LFR with far more total damage than almost any other special weapon that I'm aware of. It is ultimately up to you if you want to deal with the charge time that comes with using a linear fusion rifle, but for me, it's totally worth it. I'm excited to see what the Catalyst will bring for Lorentz Driver. Once I have it, I'll start thinking up some builds for the full review and build guide. Definitely an upgrade from Cryosthesia. That's it for now though. If you enjoyed, be sure to drop a like, subscribe if you want to know when I upload a new video or start streaming, and consider joining the small community I'm building up on Discord, where you can chat with me or other viewers and get notified of when I upload or stream. You can follow me on Twitter as well for another way to be notified of uploads and streams, along with whatever I decide to retweet on that day. Of course, I also just appreciate you watching it all, and for that, I thank you. I've been Scoobyfoo. I'll see you all later.